You are tuned in to the High at 9 News Hour, where you will hear from cannabis industry experts and professionals from around the country talk about important topics while shining light on global issues and discussing cannabis as it relates to politics, regulation and reform, data and technology, science, research and medicine, family and parenting, art, celebs and entertainment, fitness, sports, mental health and wellness, and plant-based medicines and enthogenics. Together, we are building a stronger community, fighting the stigma and creating change. With your hosts, Jason Beck, Rico Lamitte, and Nicole West, joined by special industry expert correspondents from around the country and daily antics brought to you by Cannabis. Coming to you live Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time. Thank you for getting high at 9 with us.
Oh yeah, good morning everyone. It's Monday, October 31st. Happy Halloween. Today is Reformation Day, World Savings Day, World Cities Day, National Doorbell Day, Girl Scout Founders Day, National Magic Day, National Knock 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 Joke Day, and National Caramel Apple Pie Day. Thank you for joining us and getting high at 9 with us. It's also high noon on the East Coast, and please remember to like, share, and subscribe to us on all social media platforms. We're live every Monday through Friday on YouTube, and don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube, and we're audio only on Clubhouse. And if you are joining on us Clubhouse, you can participate in the show by raising your hand if you have a brief comment on the story most recently presented. But now, without further ado, we're going to bring up our first guest.
That's right. It is the man, the myth, the legend. That's right, the dope dad himself, Rico Lamitte, when he is not changing diapers or playing Sharon Paste and macaroni shells. You can find him at a TEDx convention babysitting grown-ass adults. When he's not doing any of that, he used to be out keeping in shape, practicing on his football skills. But a tragic injury recently happened where he pulled his Achilles tendon on his Achilles tendon. That's right, it is him, the man, the myth, the legend, the dope dad himself, Rico Lamitte.
Yeah, thank you, Jason, and happy Halloween, and welcome back, everybody watching, listening, and tuned into High at 9 this morning. I'm taking off parts of my costume, of parts of my just might be culturally appropriated costume for my headline because it's a serious topic, and I don't want to distract or take anything away from the discussion. It's from the Green Market Report by Deborah Borchardt, How Pig Farmers Could Affect Cannabis Interstate Commerce. Pigs, slurs for cops, ingredients to great breakfast, maybe keys to interstate commerce, but also a death blow to social equity. A little American piggy unable to make its way to the California markets, making the U.S. Supreme Court question the Dormant Commerce Clause. And it might sound like a long shot, but if the case wins out, weed's free to be sold across state lines, likely at the cost of state social equity laws. The Dormant Commerce Clause, or DCC, prohibits state laws from discriminating against interstate or international commerce, deeming it a federal issue and not up to individual states. Until recently, because of sustained federal illegality, whenever a state legalized cannabis, licensees had to hold residency within that state. But the law was recently stricken down in a Maine court, and if Michigan social equity applicants' lawsuit against New York wins out, they are next. Now let's talk pigs. The Supreme Court recently heard an animal welfare case regarding California's Proposition 12, looking to ban in-state pork sales born to mama pigs confined in small spaces. The Golden State currently gets 99% of its pork from other states, and the farmers say they're the ones getting hurt, and this violates the DCC. Conservative Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch ain't a fan of the DCC and used the Port case to challenge it, even getting a cosign from IRL Duff man in a robe himself, Brett Kavanaugh. Law 360 says upholding California's attempt to dictate the farm conditions for out-of-state pigs would undermine the principles of the Dormant Commerce Clause and lead states to target one another with burdensome regulations, like cannabis. Per the article, so far the Supreme Court's only talked amongst themselves about the DCC, but if New York wins its case requiring residency after Maine lost their case, there's a good chance it sparks the highest court in the land to do a little tweaking. Pro-DCC arguments in cannabis resonate mostly with operators in developed regions wanting to transport across states to increase efficiency, scalability, and streamline operations, allowing targeted cultivation and manufacturing in states where it costs the least. Those against it are mostly in emerging markets who've focused development in economically distressed areas. Borchardt argues DCC would benefit MSOs and hurt the little guys. But it ain't so simple. It's more of a battle between the OGs and the new booties. California and Oregon OGs have a glut of product because they've been in business for so damn long. Inflated operating costs and deflated product prices lead to trap markets in both states thriving, making it tough for legal players to compete. If interstate commerce opens up, it'd save the craft producers in both states from going extinct in oversaturated markets and allow them to spread decades of honed technique to the rest of the world. But it also means underdeveloped markets never reach full potential. Not all MSOs are the same. Some successful California, Colorado, Oregon, and Washington companies started small in-state but later became MSOs. Others were spawned by hundreds of millions of dollars from VCs backing Chads, Brads, and Karens from the jump that never could cut it in places where culture and quality matter more than coinage. While it's easy to vilify the corporate weed giants, they're the ones creating the most jobs and investment opportunities for smaller, distressed communities that would most likely never benefit from the boon without them. Complicating things even further, social equity. If state residency falls due to DCC, social equity licenses are next. I've always argued in order for social equity to ever be sustainable, it would have to be done top down on a federal level because municipalities cannot agree on what the fuck term even means, let alone states. DCC would codify the theory into law, meaning no more second chances for felons, licensing reserved for those unfairly targeted by the war on drugs, or opportunities for communities of color to participate in yet another industry built off their backs. Oh, and I'd love to hear any arguments claiming that federal government's competent enough to iron out a cohesive social equity strategy ahead of full legalization. Let's keep it really real here. It ain't gonna happen. Capitalism is a fucked up system, and there's no clearer picture of how fucked up capitalism really is than in the cannabis industry, which makes the fact a Supreme Court Port case possibly becoming both savior and downfall of two beloved pieces of it, craft farmers and social equity applicants, so damn poetic. We know exactly how bad that bacon is for us, but it tastes so damn good. This is Rico Lamitte, dopest dad on the street, and I'd love to hear what the rest of the team has to say about this one. High at 9 News. What you guys think?
There's a lot of pork in this story, Rico. A lot of pork.
Lots of it.
Well, I sort of get the parallels, but then you're still dealing with a fairly illegal substance. Pork is not. So I don't know if this thing
The
works.
case is from the dormant
Commerce Clause.
Commerce Clause.
Yes.
And here's the thing. The main case got beat. So people from out of state can actually get licensed in Maine. Social equity applicants out of Michigan are suing the state of New York for social equity licenses because of that. And if they don't get it, they're going to take it to the Supreme Court, making the Supreme Court actually go and rule on this, which means we might have interstate commerce. And if that happens, it might nullify intrastate social equity laws as well, because you can't have one law in one state that's going to screw up licensing in another.
I bet you there's absolutely zero chance the Supreme Court takes this case up.
But without, I'm going to go back to what Gretchen said. Without federal legalization, I don't quite understand. Like, I've I've heard this argument a few times over the years about the concern about what the Dormant Commerce Clause could actually do to the cannabis industry if enacted differently against us, and if enacted against us.
Mhm.
But I'm not. I guess I'm not following. Like, I do understand the strangeness of it. I just don't see it actually. I don't know. I don't see it being as big of a deal. There's without the federal legalization, I don't see how that would actually make sense.
Exactly. And you can't have interstate commerce without descheduling of cannabis.
Yeah. So, I mean, we have to deschedule it. And, that's a big fear in the same breath when we talk about if we do deschedule, what descheduling could do to the social equity movement, right? Like, that is probably one of my only like caveats to like being like, I think, deschedule, I think, because like, I don't want to fuck up the opportunities. I don't want people to get their opportunities taken from them if we go the full deschedule route. But without that, I don't understand
deschedule or keep it the way it is. There is no other option.
I agree with you 100% on that, Nicole. The problem is, like right now, California is being sued by these pork farmers because of that, because of Gavin Newsom saying that you have to have like free range pigs if you're going to sell pork in California, and all the but 99% of California's pork comes from outside of the state. And so a bunch of pork farmers are suing California because of that. And they're saying that this can apply to cannabis as well.
It could, but without federal legalization, they won't be able to do it. Like the interstate commerce can't become an option without the federal legalization.
And Gavin Newsom doesn't have the right or the ability legislatively to be able to block pork coming in to California.
I think this could become precedent down the road that perhaps could be argued, but that can't be used until there's legalization.
I think if we deschedule and that at the same time this shit happens, then it could be fucking terrifying really quickly. Just the same as like I was saying, like descheduling, we don't really know. You know what I mean? Like what the transactions are going to happen immediately afterwards. But if this happened and descheduling simultaneously, I mean that it's not as scary as Big Pharma taking it, but it definitely is frightening.
Go ahead, Dr. Felicia.
I was going to say, are there any cannabis think tanks trying to think about these things that if once upon, in the future, cannabis does become descheduled, is anyone thinking about, all these different ramifications so that we don't have a disaster when it happens?
Yeah, but all of these think tanks it's like there's a bunch of different kind of factions, if you will, within the industry, and they all either have very opposing views from each other, or they can't come up with a middle ground to be like, we believe in this one thing. Like there are very few organizations. Like, I mean, even like NCIA, like none of them have like, I wouldn't know what they stand for.
They're not on the same page.
I don't know what they stand for.
I like what Dr. Mary has to say about this. She says this is like asking all growers to grow outside only. It's pretty much the same thing. California and Gavin Newsom cannot force pork producers to only produce pork in a certain way that's going to be brought into California. That's just total ridiculous and gross overregulation.
Well, and I have a question for folks who might.
They're the fifth largest economy in the world. He has that power. He has some.
He doesn't have that power legislatively. He does not. He cannot hamper commerce. No, he cannot. It's the same way when we have interstate trade. Michigan could not block California weed from going into the state of Michigan.
100% not true. We have our own we have our own pesticide regulations. Every state is allowed to have their own pesticide regulations. And so as a pesticide regulator, you can choose. In California, there are literally the least amount of pesticides available in the state of California from any of the other 50 states, okay? We have 1/3 of the average amount of pesticides available in this state. So there are 2/3 of the pesticide manufacturers that cannot ship a fucking bottle to this state.
And that is not true. And that's the argument that Deborah Borchardt is making in her article right here. She's saying because of that, because California is so strict and everything, but they're going to start allowing people to have licenses from other states. This opens up precedent. And and because of what happened in Maine, which is unprecedented. And if these people from Michigan can get social equity licenses, if they lose their case and they can't get licenses in New York, this can go to the Supreme Court, and we might have like out of nowhere, we might just out of nowhere get interstate commerce, and we're not ready for that. And there's a bunch of questions that remain to be answered, just like what you said, Jason. Like, can it be regulated from state to state? Like the same,
can't.
we don't know. It's
Can
gonna
I
fuck
ask
up
a
lot
quick
of things.
question, please?
Go for it, Gretchen.
Equity is the
Anyone,
biggest one.
anyone who might be smarter than me, and it might be Dr. Felicia. How do insurance companies get away with you can only buy insurance in your states or whatever, and those sort of things? I mean,
Because they don't have
that's-
interstate commerce in insurance. And insurance is the only
Right, so I'm
industry
saying, put in the same
that
argument
commerce
you
is
made
hampered
for
by state
cannabis.
lines.
No, it's there's specific licensing. It's the same thing as law and medical practice, right? You're licensed
Yeah.
to insure people in certain places. You're licensed to practice law in certain places. You're
Healthcare.
licensed to practice
Well,
medical in
cannabis
certain places.
growers are
It's a
licensed
licensing.
in particular places, so can't the same argument be made then?
That's where I'm not sure how it would make sense.
This is why they're saying it could very well go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says
I could see the
gotta open
Supreme
up your
Court
borders.
taking
There's
up
no way
the
this is
pig
going to the
case.
Open
Supreme
it up,
Court.
and you
Bless
got
your
like
hearts,
a
it's going to the Supreme
Well,
Court.
I could see the Supreme Court taking up the pig case.
Sounds like a whole lot of hoopla.
Right.
It sounds like a
People need to
all this-
remember that a big stipulation for a case going to the Supreme Court is that it affects a shit ton of people and for the greater good. And I don't think
Washington loves pork, Gretchen. Washington
I hear
loves
you,
pork.
but I don't think California is going to get it done, because there were plenty of cases with election fraud that tried to go to the Supreme Court and they didn't take that shit on, and that would have affected a lot of people. But they were like, no, it's just the state, so F you. So
well, election fraud.
I wouldn't
Supreme
rely on the
Court,
Supreme Court.
Oh,
down with the pork. What a great segue to Mr. Jason
Yes.
Beck. Jason Beck's the longest running retailer in the history of regulated cannabis, probably the least favorite person for any pork, whether it be in your bill or on your plate or in a uniform. Jason Beck, what do you have for us today?
That was very catchy, Nicole. I see what you did there. That was very, very cute. Good job.
Thanks.
Good job with that. Happy Halloween.
Jason doesn't eat pork, if anyone's curious.
I do not
And he doesn't
eat
like
pork.
cops.
I think pork is
How do you not eat
disgusting.
pork?
I think
He
it's
doesn't eat pork and he
disgusting.
doesn't
I
like
don't
cops.
understand how anyone has ever ate pork. It's
I
totally
love all
baffling
forms
to
of
me.
pork.
Oh, I'm sure you do.
Natural,
You live in
processed,
Washington.
don't care.
You live in Washington, D.C., so I'm sure you
Bologna,
love the pork.
kielbasa,
That's right.
Bacon.
But my story, Gretchen, I
Shoulder
think you're going to
ribs.
find very interesting because it reiterates your narrative. Because the Indiana governor, Eric Holcomb, is not going to enact blanket pardons for minor marijuana offenses. That's right. On October 17th, Indiana Governor Eric Holcomb said he won't show leniency to Indiana residents for minor marijuana offenses, despite President Biden's request for governors to consider state-level pardons. The Biden administration announced a plan to pardon thousands of offenders convicted for simple marijuana possession at the federal level on October 6th, according to a statement from the White House. The president should work with Congress, not around them, to discuss changes to the law federally, Holcomb said in a statement to WTHR. Through Holcomb's statement does not signal support for total decriminalization. He agrees that many minor marijuana offenses are not deserving of life sentences after an individual has served their time. Indiana's current law states that those who are convicted of possession will be charged with a Class B misdemeanor. The charge escalates to a level 6 felony if the person has a prior conviction for the drug offense and possesses at least 30 grams or more of marijuana. Despite the strict Indiana code, Monroe County has taken steps to reduce the amount of judicial resources allocated for simple possession marijuana offenses. Yet in 2019 statement, Monroe County prosecutor Erica Opelhart stated that she cannot legally issue a blanket refusal to prosecute possession charges. Though she supports decriminalization, a 2020 Monroe County criminal justice and incarceration study found that 80% of marijuana cases end before incarceration, though the pretrial diversion program. The program may require individuals to participate in alcohol and drug education courses and substance abuse prevention programs, according to the prosecutor's website. Well, I'll tell you what, if you live in Indiana, don't expect a cannabis pardon, because you're probably going to come up short. And this is Jason Beck reporting for High at 9 News.
Was that an article that just backed up the bet that you had against Gretchen for you to lose?
It backed up. Yeah, I started off in the beginning saying that this is backing up Gretchen's statement. This is a governor that is.
So are you going to send her money?
No, this is there's still 48 other governors that we're talking about, and not to mention I'm still waiting on Massachusetts to do it, because once Massachusetts does it, it's a mass pardon.
It ain't happening. Get over it.
Gretchen, if Mass MASS does it, yes. I feel like we have to give it to him. If for whatever reason Massachusetts specifically doesn't,
I'm betting. I put
my
money on Mass.
For any state, if you can come up with one single state, Jason Beck, you get $100. Yep. It's not going to happen.
I know. Just give it some time, Gretchen. Give it some time.
No. You can't wait 6 years.
We still have an election coming up
this year.
We still have an election.
I was going to say, what is the term? Like when he said that, did he give any sort of like times? Like, hey,
I gave a time frame. Not Jason Beck though. He didn't want to give a time frame.
Wait, hold on.
Let's tell to freeze over.
No, let's stay give Jason until the end of the presidency, right? Because he didn't give like a date, like you have to pardon them by this week, like.
Fine, I'll give you to the end of shit. I'll give you. Well, I want to collect my money. I don't want to wait 5 years.
Right? No, that's what I'm saying. End of the presidency. Just this term. Just the end of this term. I mean, he's not
2 more years. You're gonna make me wait 2 years?
I mean, technically, you're probably gonna end up having to pay me before that 2 years ends up
Gretchen,
anyway.
Alternatively, if all 50 states say no before then you'll have that. Right now,
they're not going to say no. Politicians aren't going to be like, no, down with mass pardons.
There was one here that just came forward and said that.
We're looking into it.
There was one here that just said there's no way in hell that I'm mass pardoning marijuana smokers.
Isn't he Republican?
Oh,
I mean, he's Indiana, so I'm going to assume that he's a Republican governor. The article did not state, but normally does.
It ain't happening. Get over it. Give me my money.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
What's the Indiana cannabis industry?
So technically, Gretchen, you'd be profiting off people being incarcerated if you won the bet.
I mean, are they
no problem with that.
Ouch! Holy shit!
That's awful, Jason.
That's not fair. Like,
I mean, it's true.
I'm not betting on people's incarceration. I'm betting on politicians refusing to do a damn thing because they just won't. Ain't happening.
Look, the person he's climbing up your stairwell again.
It's probably a burglar. Let's keep going.
Dude, go.
Oh, it's the Paul Pelosi guy.
Oh, come on now. Come on now. Is it too soon?
Too soon.
Gretchen, are you safe?
Tomorrow ain't promised.
Are you safe, Gretchen? Yeah, are you
I got my pistols. I got you and Salem. They're ready to roll.
No, but seriously, about the Indiana market, are they even on the precipice of getting some kind of legalization?
No.
Not even close.
Absolutely not.
Not even close. But you know what I will tell you is that Indiana has produced a number of amazing cultivators that I know that currently produce amazing cannabis in the state of California. So shout out to the Indiana-born cultivators here in California.
Shout out to the
right now, Indiana is pretty much surrounded by other states that have it.
Exactly.
Like, nope, don't care.
Yep.
I used to push back across the bridge to GI. Gary, Indiana. Let's keep it, bro. Let's keep it going. All right. As a felon, the woman formerly known as Jail Google dedicated her life to paying forward the knowledge learned across 30 days spent in a cold Colorado cell forward, because she never wants you to end up in the same place. She's now a Long Beach-based agriculture, efficiency, and compliance expert and part-time student working on her doctorate in dirtbag dynamics. Up next is the self-described data bitch herself, Nicole.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much for that introduction. Watching your mustache fall off at the end was my favorite part. My headline today is actually coming out of Nevada. For anybody who's paying attention to my outfit today, I went as a Colorado Wook. So I felt like this was very appropriate for my intro for the day. I've even got my slides with my socks on, and a Jason Burris and a Joe P. Pendy to make sure that I'm really representing culture. And I've got my dab rig with my torch to make sure that we are ready. My headline today, I'm a little confused about, because again, we keep going back and forth with this state versus federal conversation. And my headline today is coming out of 2 News, Las Vegas, and it is saying that cannabis is no longer a controlled substance in Nevada following the judge's ruling, which I don't understand how that happens, but let's see. A Clark County judge ruled on Wednesday that the Nevada Board of Pharmacy does not have any authority to regulate cannabis and cannabis derivatives under the state law. Judge Joe Hardy had previously ruled from the bench that Pharmacy Board's classification of cannabis as a Schedule I controlled substance violated the Nevada Constitution in regards to cannabis law. Wednesday's ruling means that the Nevada Board of Pharmacy cannot reschedule cannabis as a controlled substance under any schedule, Schedule II, etc. Cannabis Equity and Inclusion Community President and co-founder Ashley Dodson said that cannabis has been legal in Nevada for decades, but that hasn't stopped the law enforcement from treating Black and brown people like criminals. We're grateful for the ACLU of Nevada for taking this case on and for Judge Hardy for hearing it with fairness and dignity. As far as social equity is concerned, we've seen business act strategically to keep Black and brown people out of the unlicensed market and by preventing pathways to ownership. CEIC is hopeful that this is the last of the loopholes allowing for criminalization of cannabis to fall by the wayside. We can get back to our original mission of assisting communities harmed by the most failed war on drugs into the community. So the ACLU of Nevada legal director Chris Peterson said there's been an ongoing inconsistency on how Nevada categorizes cannabis. For some people, it's a medicine or a good time on a Friday night. And for some people, it was a felony. We're glad that we've now resolved the inconsistency to prevent further injustices and will continue to work to ensure the promise of cannabis decriminalization throughout Nevada. So I want to read the beginning portion of this actual document. So the 8th Judicial Court of Nevada on Wednesday, the 27th. So the official day was on September 14th was when the document got filed, but it got signed on Wednesday. And it says this ruling is limited to the petition of compliant in front of the court on only for addressing of the issues of whether the scheduling of cannabis as a Schedule I substance is in conflict with Article 4, Section 38 of the Constitution of the state of Nevada. So this entire case is built off of the fact that Nevada, similarly to Colorado, amended their constitution with their cannabis regulations. And so the Constitution, and I think this is super interesting because they should probably have the same response in states like Colorado, which was the first state, one of the first states to legalize in 2012 for adult use, but also the first state to put it on as a constitutional amendment. So I'm curious to see what this actually means big picture. I know that it's basically just thwarting locally at the state level from the pharmaceutical board to have anything to do with anything. But I'm curious if more states step up and do this, what kind of effect this might have on our ability to, deschedule a bus. And I'm Nicole West reporting for High at 9 News.
Shout out to Nevada. This is huge, man. I love this.
Yeah. Like they're like, fuck you.
Yes.
I mean,
Nevada's
I think
just
that this
Control
would
this
stand
substance.
a better chance of ending up at a Supreme Court because stating that something's a controlled substance affects every single person in a state, not just people trying to get licenses or a business. And frankly, it puts them in direct conflict with DOJ and DEA and all these other folks. I mean, this is something that needs to be decided. And I think it's a great state rights argument. It's like if other states want to go out there and do this, I mean, that's another way to say to the feds, this is bullshit. You guys need to deal with it. So we're going to do it on our own.
More states need to follow this for sure.
Yeah, they're saying like, okay, states' rights, and ignoring the whole point of states' rights in the beginning, just being a mask for racism, ignoring that whole past behind it. Like, if you're saying that this should go to the Supreme Court, right? Like, shouldn't all of it go to the Supreme Court? Shouldn't legalization go to the Supreme Court? Shouldn't descheduling go to the Supreme Court?
But I feel like this will expedite that. I feel like this will expedite that because when a state literally says we are going to disregard the scheduling, like fuck you. Like I think if more states did that and we're like, look, this is in direct conflict, and if more states had that stance against it as a reschedule, I think we would have a lot better chance. Like that's all.
I mean,
in order
just
for
like
it to
Roe
go
v. Wade, it's a bunch of states decided to ignore Roe v. Wade and do what they wanted with their own abortion laws. And that's how it got to the Supreme Court.
But
And-
in order for it to go to the Supreme Court, wouldn't the federal government have to challenge the state in a
Oh,
lawsuit?
they will eventually, dude. This is Vegas. Come on. I
mean,
feel like
we're
they
long-
will.
I don't think this administration is going to challenge this.
The
this
feds don't have to
Roe
challenge
in
it.
Nevada.
Roe v. Wade was number one. Affirmative action is on the chopping block, and they're also like gay marriage, interracial marriage, like all this stuff. We're long overdue for a ton of constitutional amendments. So who's going to have the courage to bring that to the fucking table and start
Well,
working on some amendments, because it's
It's
going
a
to be a
lot
mess.
harder to get a constitutional amendment passed. I think you should just stick with the court, frankly. You know how
Well, we
hard
need
it is
we
to
need
get
some
it.
amendments to make sure that people have rights. Like a lot of the
You
stuff
ain't
that
gonna
we've been
get
taking for
2/3 of the
granted,
votes for a
a lot of the
constitutional
stuff we've been
amendment.
taking for
You
granted
can't
is
get
about to be
60 votes. You
snatched
ain't
away
getting
from us
2/3
because we
votes.
have
You're
a conservative Supreme Court that's totally politicized the whole fucking process.
Gretchen, do
That
we need more states to do this before it can get to the Supreme Court, or would just one case go to the
No,
Supreme Court?
I mean, any one case can make it to the Supreme Court, but if you had multiple,
We'd have better
states,
chance,
yeah,
though.
it would be better. It would be a better opportunity, I would say.
Every state, do this. Like it would
Right.
cause people to see it. You know what I mean? It would cause the federal government to see it. One state is one thing, but if California jumped on this, imagine like California, what is the 5th largest economy? Like if California jumped on this and was like, no, we're not going to do this. Like we're not going to let it be rescheduled. This is not a reschedule option. This is a deschedule option. I mean, I think we'd have a lot better chance to actually get this shit done. But with that said, we got to get some bills paid. So let's hop to a commercial. Thank you guys all for entertaining me on that conversation. And I really hope that we can get some descheduling going. At True Classic OG, we live by one motto: stay true. We stay true to our legacy cut of True OG that's always fresh, piney, gassy, and delicious. We represent the spirit, hustle, and diversity of our great city of Angels. And we stay true to the spirit of this plant, doing everything in-house to ensure that you get the highest quality and consistency with every batch. And that's what's made us LA's favorite OG. True Classic OG. Stay true, Los Angeles. The thoughts, opinions, and general shade thrown on the High at 9 News are those of the individual speakers, not those of any other speaker or its followers. The statements made do not constitute legal or accounting advice, and our speakers make no representation regarding the legal status of any substance in a country, area, territory, or its authorities. These expressed in this room do not establish fiduciary relationships. Their sponsors do not imply, constitute the endorsement by us, the expression of any opinion whatsoever, any speaker on stage. If you're an easily offended person, the show's probably not for you. You also probably don't know why we need to deschedule or bust.
Flying into LAX and you want to taste some of the best weed in the world, then stop by LAXCC, the closest dispensary to LAX, located at 8332 Lincoln Boulevard and open from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. 7 days a week. Always make LAXCC your first stop when you touch down in LA and score like a winner. And don't forget to tell them I sent you and mention you'd like to get high at 9 for 10% off your full order.
She's well known in DC circles for cooking up excellence and baking this fucking mustache, dude, and baking delicious treats. But don't get it twisted, she's still a feisty redheaded conservative with proven long form Mayflower roots that does not believe that any new constitutional amendments will ever be made. Coming up next is the founder of Panoptic Strategies and our very own Washington insider, Gretchen Gailey.
I would like to wish everyone a happy Halloween and give shout out to my Salem witch trial roots, which are real, just as real as my Mayflower roots. And my squad, the Sanderson sisters. These are my girls.
Burn her at the stake. Burn her.
My headline today is coming from Marijuana Moment. Federal Commission considers changes to how past marijuana convictions can affect sentencing for new crimes. The Federal U.S. Sentencing Commission says it's considering possible amendments to guidelines on whether and to what extent people's criminal history for marijuana possession can be used against them in sentencing decisions for new convictions. On Friday, the independent branch of the federal judiciary unanimously approved 14 policy priorities for an amendment cycle ending in May 2023. The cannabis item wasn't included in an earlier version of the priority proposal list circulated for public feedback earlier this month, but it was added and adopted after President Joe Biden issued a mass marijuana pardon proclamation. While USSC's sentencing guidelines are no longer binding on judges, they're still considered influential and must be calculated and taken into account before they issue their decisions. Now USSC is calling it a priority to look into amending the guidelines for defendants' criminal history reviews when it comes to the impact of simple possession or marijuana offenses. Two key components of the sentencing guidelines concern the conduct of the current offense before the court and the person's prior criminal history. If USSC were to adopt an amendment saying that cannabis possession shouldn't be an enhancing factor or should be a lower consideration, it could theoretically have widespread criminal justice impacts. Eric Sterling, longtime legal observer of federal sentencing reform initiatives and former assistant counsel to the U.S. House Judiciary Committee, told Marijuana Moment on Friday that the inclusion of the possible reform as is priority is good news. It's fair to say that this is a response to the signal that Biden gave about pardoning people with such convictions. To that point, an earlier tentative list of USSC proposed priorities, which didn't include the cannabis language, was published in the Federal Register one day before Biden made his pardon proclamation, providing relief to Americans who've committed federal marijuana offenses. USSC separately released a report following the president's action, breaking down the demographics of the thousands of people who received the relief. It also routinely published data on federal prosecutions overall and has shown a gradual decline in cannabis cases amid the state legalization movement. Now, while the commission must still develop and pass any potential amendments to its guidelines, it is possible that it could soon be the case that prior simple cannabis possession offenses would be a non-issue from a sentencing perspective for new defendants. It is also potentially the case that a new sentencing policy for cannabis criminal histories could be retroactively applied. A potentially significant consequence of changing the criminal history scoring for marijuana convictions is whether it leads to any retroactive application in resentencing hearings. I don't know what the number of cases might be, but considering how many marijuana possession convictions there have been, and in the population likely to have been convicted for other federal offenses, this could result in the release of hypothetically some thousands of federal prisoners and the shortening of the sentences of thousands more. After releasing the initial priority consideration proposal on October 5th, USSC received more than 8,000 public comments that helped inform the final list. The commission is appreciative of the feedback it has received from all corners of the federal sentencing community. Judge Carlton Reeves, chair of the commission, said in a press release, "As we now pivot to work on the final priorities set forth today, we look forward to a careful and detailed examination of these issues and our continued interaction with the public to ensure the federal sentencing guidelines properly reflect current law and promote uniformity in sentencing." I would say out of this whole mass pardon bullshit October surprise that Biden put forth, this could be the one thing that actually does something for people in the criminal justice system. I mean, we hear so often about people who've been put away for their third strike. What if one of their strikes had been a marijuana conviction? This could definitely give people their lives back. This is Gretchen for High at 9 News.
I am so encouraged by how quickly they moved to include Biden's quote unquote pardons. That I think is very nice, very helpful.
I think it's interesting that Gretchen's story kind of supports Jason's side, and Jason's story supports Gretchen's side, even though neither of them, actually meant anything. No. Neither of them, I grasp that neither of them actually was like this did or did not happen. But your story is more going towards the Jason's thing might happen, and Jason's story is leaning more towards the your thing might happen. That's just all. That's know that called neither fair of them, and balanced. I love it, guys. I just wanted to point it out. Good job.
It's an elephant fight.
Yeah, I love it.
I think it would be extremely difficult for these people to look at this though retroactively. I find it hard to believe someone's really going to take that into account. Unless there is some blaring example that someone can make the argument for this, but I think it's important moving forward.
Jason, when I'm voting or when I'm betting on Republicans, you're usually my fucking safe bet on this is what's going to happen. But I think Gretchen trumps you. No. And Gretchen gets my Republican vote. I'm going to ask Gretchen what the Republicans think. That's just the girls, girls just girling up together. We're sticking together? No. Yeah, that's all it is. Yeah, nothing more than that, because I'll tell you what, I am going to win because I'm going to make sure that Massachusetts does it.
She might trump him on Halloween, but when come Christmas, he is DeSantis.
Oh, no, Trump's
Holy
going to beat
shit.
DeSantis, bro. DeSantis can't even run once Trump announces.
Hate.
Just saying. Just is what it is.
Let's keep it. Let's keep
Jason,
it
who are
moving.
you for Halloween?
Who am I for Halloween?
A liberal.
He went as who he truly is on the inside.
I am Jason Beck. That's right. That is who I am. I'm dressing up as Jason Beck for Halloween because I know that I'm interesting and I know that I have better candy than everybody else. So
Is it fentanyl laced?
Yes.
Bro, Jason, you don't even eat edibles. I don't even agree.
That's
Right.
I do not eat edibles.
Gretchen has better candy.
I do not eat edibles. No,
like,
she does not. No, she has better
eats
baked
edibles.
goods.
Yes, she
has
does.
better baked goods.
I take edibles. Yes, I don't.
She
I
takes edibles
have
and
better
she makes baked
candy.
goods.
But
I have better
Nicole,
candy.
you know,
She doesn't make
Jason,
Reese's
facts don't
peanut butter
matter.
cups.
Facts do not matter with Jason. It's all about how loud you can get and how big you can puff your chest. That's what
That is so silly, bro. So silly. Oh man, we're gonna keep it moving. Thank you so much for that story, Gretchen. I look forward to our friendly discourse going forward on this issue, and I look forward to collecting my money once it's time for you to pay up. That's right. But one visit to this office is sure to get you access to all kinds of blue pills. All shapes, sizes, and colors are always included and welcome in this safe space. She's the Plants for Life CEO and a dual board certified physician, always promoting cannabis as medicine. And if you play your cards right, she'll mix some yellow ones with your blue ones to give you a greener experience. That's right. It is none other than the Dr. Felicia Dawson.
Thank you, Jason. And I don't eat pork either, so we have that in common, at least. Happy Monday, everyone. My headline comes from Marijuana Moment, and I have a trigger warning for anyone who is uncomfortable discussing or hearing about the vagina, menstrual periods, and sanitary pads. The title of this research article is Effects of Hemp Sanitary Pads on the Vaginal Microecology by Young Sun et al. In the Journal of Computational and Mathematical Methods in Medicine. Go figure. When I say the word microecology, think microbiome, that collection of bacteria and viruses, fungi that live in and on our bodies. These microorganisms interact with us via the endocannabinoid system and help us to do everything from digesting our food to telling our brains and immune systems what to do. The normal healthy vagina has a predominance of bacteria called lactobacilli, which helps keep the pH at 3.5 to 4.5, which is very acidic. This is considered a balanced, healthy vaginal microecology. So in this study, 1,002 community-based women of childbearing age were recruited from 5 community hospitals in Beijing from February to May 2021. Women who had vaginal infections or symptoms of one in the last month were excluded. They were randomly assigned to the experimental and control groups. The experimental group used hemp cotton sanitary pads, and the control group was divided into 2 who used cotton sanitary pads from the top 5 brands in China. At baseline, the women were examined and their vaginal environments were evaluated. From this data, they were further divided into 3 groups. Normal vaginal microecology, which is about 4% of them had normal microbiomes, and abnormal microecology, 65%, and suspected vaginal infections, 31%. The women were followed for 3 menstrual periods. They were re-examined 3 to 5 days after their 3rd menstrual period ended. During the 3 months, the incidence of vaginitis was the same in the experimental and control groups at just over 6%. There was no significant change in pH between the groups, which I found interesting. There was a statistically significant improvement in vaginal microecology status of the women who used the hemp sanitary pads after 3 menstrual cycles versus those who used the ordinary cotton sanitary pads. In the discussion, the authors state that the hemp has an antibacterial effect built into its fibers. Hemp fibers have strong adsorption capacity and a unique porous structure. The abundance of oxygen in the pores of the hemp fibers makes the survival of anaerobes difficult. Anaerobes are those bacteria that cannot thrive in the presence of oxygen. Thus, hemp fibers inhibit bacterial growth via their unique structure. And number 2, hemp fibers contain organic salts and several active phenols that kill and inhibit a variety of bacteria. While there was no therapeutic effect against established vaginal infections after 3 months of hemp sanitary pad use, this research suggested there is a scientific basis for preventing infections. The authors list 2 limitations. Number 1, small sample size. Number 2, short follow-up time. And I would add a third, selection bias. Given the small number of women who had a normal vaginal microecology, I suspect women who were prone to get vaginal infections signed up for this study more so than women who don't get them. I believe if they had used hemp tampons, they would have gotten much more robust results because they would have been putting the medicine directly on the organ of interest. A sanitary pad is essentially outside the body, laying against the vulva. Given the antibacterial properties of hemp, this plant should have a huge future in the medical supply business, involving surgical dressings, wound management, especially for diabetics, in addition to feminine hygiene products. This is Dr. Felicia Dawson reporting for the High at 9 News. Can you all think of any other medical uses for hemp?
It's great for skin conditions, especially Rick Simpson oil.
So I did want to talk and ask and kind of make a couple comments about your article, specifically about tampons and pads. One thing I do want to make sure, and I know I talk about it a lot, we're aware of the use of hemp in remediation of toxic chemicals. And when people are buying volumes of hemp. And so then my first question is, I don't know the answer to this. Is there any testing requirements on the materials used that are to make tampons? And if not, holy shit, because I've never really thought about it until this exact moment right now. But the fibers and things going into those manufacturing. And so, you see like the idea of using organic versions. And obviously I want to go organic, better, always better. But like, I've never really thought about like the fucking toxicity of literally just jamming some fucking toxic hemp into your hoo-ha so that you, I mean, so that you, and over again, like the toxicity of these products. I've never really thought about that until now in this exact conversation. But yes, the idea of using hemp on any sort of suppository version or cannabinoids for suppositories, anal suppositories as well. The conversation, I know since we're already going down it, the conversation for men with prostate issues, it's a really, prostate cancer is something that men don't like to talk about. Men don't like to talk about, any of their health in that way. In general, guys don't like to talk about health, but cannabis is hugely advantageous for men dealing with prostate issues as well. And so that would be something that let's talk about both things. Let's talk about the vaginas. Let's talk about men. Let's talk about all of our reproductive health. I think cannabis in general is good for reproductive health.
I don't know that they test tampons in the way that you're thinking of, like testing cannabis for toxins.
Chemicals.
I think, there was a study that came out, I think in 2018, where they were testing 14 tampons versus vaginal cups. Vaginal cups catch the blood instead of a napkin or a pad or a tampon. And it seemed to make a difference whether or not it was cotton and rayon versus just cotton. The OB tampon, there was a big thing about toxic shock syndrome with the OB tampon, was mainly cotton and viscose, which is a type of synthetic rayon. But Tampax had the lowest rate of toxic shock syndrome, and that's a combination of cotton and rayon. So it's interesting that one was a real rayon and cotton and had the lowest effect in terms of you're at least risk for toxic shock syndrome versus a synthetic rayon versus cotton. But the menstrual cups tend to promote or have a greater risk for toxic shock syndrome. And I think part of that is because blood is such a great medium to grow infections in. Typically, the vagina is very acidic and blood is very alkaline. Our blood is a pH of 7, and that's why the vagina is so acidic, to prevent infections. But if you've got a cup there holding the blood, it's going to maybe increase the risk of infection. And every Staph aureus doesn't cause toxic shock. Apparently, there are certain strains that cause it.
So I just Googled I'm sorry, I just Googled the chemicals, the testing, and there was like a article that popped up. The chemicals that they're finding in them: carbon disulfide, methylene chloride, methyl ethyl ketone, ethyl acetate, heptane, hexane, and toluene. And the heptane or the hexane, this is insane. 7.5 ppm of hexane in the dollar store tampons in your tampon.
Two types of meth. Two types of meth.
And that's probably why there's some women who prefer to have organic tampons. The smaller number of chemicals you got coming into your body, the better.
The same
but the vagina,
but
the vagina is not a sterile. It's not a sterile environment. It's open to the air. It's not like it's inside your body. It's actually outside your body.
I would wonder how many of those chemicals are actually in the applicator and not in the actual cotton that goes into the body.
Good point.
I love how all the dudes.
The cotton, right? The cotton's bleached. The cotton's bleached, so it has any bleached cotton product has dioxin, formaldehyde, and other horrific chemicals in it. Not even to mention systemic pesticides if it's not organic.
I have a question for Dr. Felicia. Do you think this kind of product could help women when it comes to yeast infections or UTIs to help
antimicrobial
with the microecology down in that region?
I do. I think especially a tampon or just a suppository or cream that you could put in the vagina, it would probably be better than people. A lot of times in the conventional GYN, when women have repetitive infections, they tend to say put them on suppressive antibiotic therapy, and that's a horrific thing to do. Right. So I would definitely go more for a hemp-derived product for prophylaxis or to decrease the risk of getting an infection.
It's very, very
thank you.
Story.
Yeah, thank you so much for that information and just everything you do for the community, Dr. Felicia. We really appreciate you, and everyone for joining in on that conversation. Up next, we have Matthew St. Germain. Matthew is a cannabis wizard doing his damnedest to continue the work of the Merry Pranksters and the Brotherhood of Eternal Love. Alongside the Hogwarts PhD and Trippin' Balls, this co-host of What's Good, the Cannabis Flower and Hash Review Show, and host of the Radio Free Earth podcast, boasts over 33 years in the game for sales, genetics, and cultivation. The immortal Transylvanian Count himself. Matthew, are you a lion today?
Row! Hello, St. Germain, the Friendly Lion. I was going to try to read it like this, but I can't actually see my story. So here we go. It's not the best of news. Don't expect governors to heed Biden's weed plea. Many Democrats have already taken steps to provide relief to people with convictions, while Republicans dismiss this move as a political ploy. When President Joe Biden announced plans last week to pardon thousands of people with low-level federal marijuana convictions, he implored the nation's governors to follow his lead. Don't expect him to get many takers. Republican governors have little reason to heed his call and be seen as advancing the agenda of an unpopular Democratic president when GOP messaging is focused on runaway inflation and soaring crime rates in the final stretch before Election Day. I don't think that it's going to rise to a high enough level of concern in the short term, and probably not even in the long term, said Greg Pepin, a veteran Republican political strategist in Minnesota who has worked on multiple gubernatorial campaigns. The battle lines have been hardened as it relates to the issues of this election. Republicans are campaigning on economic issues and public safety. But Democrats are unlikely to take significant steps in response to Biden's directive for very different reasons. In New York, for example, some marijuana convictions will be automatically expunged under a law that legalized cannabis last year. In Illinois, Democratic Governor J.B. Pritzker issued a blanket, what some would say a mass pardon, for more than 9,000 people in January 2021, about a year after the state legalized recreational weed. Even in some states where Democratic governors might be inclined to act on Biden's directive, like Minnesota, Louisiana, and Kansas, their options are limited because state law doesn't allow them to issue mass pardons for certain groups of offenders. Biden's executive action is the biggest shakeup in federal weed policy in more than half a century, and his directive to reevaluate how marijuana is classified under federal law could lead to permanent loosening of restrictions on the drug. But while the president's pardons are estimated to help about 6,500 people with federal cannabis possession convictions, far more have or are serving time in state prisons for similar charges. It also remains unclear how the Justice Department will go about the tricky process of figuring out who meets the criteria to qualify for pardons. And Biden's pardons won't remove convictions from anyone's criminal record because the federal process actually does not allow expunging your record on the federal level. So these limits are putting pressure on governors without giving the governors a lot of empowerment to really move forward. And what this case really points to is that we need to deschedule, decriminalize, legalize cannabis and psychedelics and release all of these psychedelic cannabis political prisoners. One last thing, both the Republicans and the Democrats are aiming to be zoning in on inflation, but nobody's talking about corporate profits and how over 54% of the price hikes that have been attributed to inflation are actually going directly into corporations' pockets as profits. This is Friendly Lion Saint Germain for the High at 9 News. Wow.
Oh yeah.
So
You know what?
please.
You know what I think probably is most likely for a Democratic governor to give one of these pardons, Gretchen, is I
What?
believe that after they lose their election next Tuesday, and during the lame duck session, they're going to be like, you know what? Fuck it. I lost. I'm going to do something for the community anyway. And I'm going to issue a mass pardon.
It's still a win, right?
It's still a win.
It would be, but that ain't gonna happen.
Because there would be no electoral consequences because they already lost.
Well,
Yeah, but how
Illinois
many
did.
politicians do you know with a conscience who are going to be like, "Yay, let me take care of the people now that I lost"?
I'm just saying. I'm thinking that it's much more likely to happen after the election as opposed to before.
Yeah. I mean,
Well,
yeah. They're more likely to take a risk.
Yeah, especially
So-
because Democrats don't want to try to appear tough on crime, which
Republicans too.
they're not.
soft on
You know what I
crime.
mean? So yeah, soft
Republicans
on
too,
crime,
right?
exactly.
Like, no Republicans gonna say that right before the election. They'll say it, they might do it quietly afterwards.
I
No,
agree
nobody's
with that
doing it
statement too. What I'm saying is
No.
that I'm not expecting any action on this until after the election. I just want to make sure that I'm being clear.
Okay, Jason Beck, would you like to clearly put a time frame on this bet?
So, so there was another article that had come out today on ABC News about the pardons and who's really being left out in a big conversation. And it was the immigration issue and people that have had their ability to ever get citizenship here taken away because of cannabis, deportation because of cannabis. And one thing that I always make sure that I tell people, I've had a few people that have worked for me over the years that have had to quit because their immigration officer told them that they could not complete their immigration process working for me because it is a federally illegal substance. And so through immigration, when they ask you what your job is and you tell them that you are working in a cannabis business, technically you cannot get your citizenship. And so they've all had to quit their jobs. And luckily their immigration people were cool enough to be like, just quit and find a new job. And I'll ask you this question next week. Like, but you can't do that. But like, they didn't know because it's like, why, what we had a 401k. This guy fucking his first cannabis job got in and he had a 401k and health insurance. Like, what would make anybody think that would be a problem with your immigration? And then you get told like, hey, you have to quit your like fairly good paying job because this is federally illegal. And then a lot of people that maybe didn't have as cool of immigration officers in that moment could have literally fucking deported them.
I know plenty of people who've had immigration issues.
My memo for the day.
On their job.
Yeah, just from having a job in cannabis. And so like, yeah, my like the pardons conversation, it's so important, but like all of this is just screaming like the need for descheduling, and like we need to be spending energy and lobby money on that. You know what I mean? Like, I think we finally, I mean, not to say that we don't want to still work with our small community, right? Because we were all like, stay local. It's like, cool. Okay. Yes. And now a lot of locals have mobilized and we're going. Now we have to mobilize as a bigger unit. We have to create the fucking
It's called Voltroning up. It's called Voltroning up.
Yes,
So
guys.
Voltron.
We need to Voltron, and everyone needs to fucking come on.
I want to be the flaming sword.
Whatever.
We already know you're flaming, Rico.
I'm a wook today for Halloween.
Oh yeah.
That's bait.
Plop, I'm a wook for Halloween.
Wook. Yes, working
Well,
away.
I would say that Politico is completely 100% correct. Governors are not going to do this. They're not going to do it before the election, and they ain't going to do it after it. So Jason Beck, pay me.
I'm thinking they're going to do it after the election.
You're crazy.
Gretchen,
You're out of your
Why not?
mind.
There's going to be
in
someone who
advance.
wants to piss the Republican incoming governor off. You know what I mean? And then they just gonna you know what? We're gonna play into this. And so I think that they totally would, without a doubt, do this during the lame duck session.
I think it's sad how little respect Joe Biden gets.
I'll get you some names. I don't think we have enough time today for
Joe
me to go and
Biden is
find
the
you all
Rodney
these
Dangerfield of presidents.
No respect. That's good.
That's about it for us today. Okay, thank you. Thank you all to everybody tuning in and getting high at 9 with us yet again. High at 9 with us yet again on Pacific, and high noon on Eastern. On the Eastern timeline. I just wrote that wrong. You can always catch us weekdays at 9 a.m. Pacific and high noon on the East Coast. Big shout out to our audience and supporters tuning in daily to the live news feed of chaos, also known as the developing cannabis industry. A very special thanks to all our haters out there. Beware each Halloween the hatred that flows through your narrow little veins and glows under the moonlight, making you an easy target, and it will soon be extracted like adrenochrome, sourcing our collective immortality, and our whole cast shall soon become immortal, just like the Count of Saint Germain taught us. Thank you to the sponsors out there, True Classic, LAXCC, and our vetted industry correspondents tuning in from all over the globe to bring much needed variety of perspectives and respected opinions to the headlines that we cover. Our production team at 3 is 4 Media, making us look and sound good on the daily, and Zaja Simone holding it down for us over in Clubhouse. Finally, thank you, Cannabis. We love you, and we owe you so much, so much more respect than you get. And this is why we do what we do every morning. Happy Halloween, everybody. Have a good old-fashioned safe time tonight. And if you're partying, please be safe out there. Happy trick-or-treating to all the dope dads and marimamas out there. Even though cannabis candies and fentanyl lace goodies have never been proven to be found, if you come across some, let us know if they're any good. My name is Rico Lamitte, dopest dad on the street, and we are signing off. Thank you for joining us again for another episode. And remember, when life gives you no place else to turn, you can always turn the fuck up.
Fentanyl lace candies. It's a real thing. Yeah, fentanyl lace candies.
Fentanyl lollipops are real. They're not in trick-or-treat bags, man.
You are tuned in to the High at 9 News Hour, where you will hear from cannabis industry experts and professionals from around the country talk about important topics while shining light on global issues and discussing cannabis as it relates to politics, regulation and reform, data and technology, science, research and medicine, family and parenting, art, celebs and entertainment, fitness, sports, mental health and wellness, and plant-based medicines and enthogenics. Together, we are building a stronger community, fighting the stigma and creating change. With your hosts, Jason Beck, Rico Lamitte, and Nicole West, joined by special industry expert correspondents from around the country and daily antics brought to you by Cannabis. Coming to you live Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time. Thank you for getting high at 9 with us.